Let's go to Zig in Salt Lake City, who has a question about the No Labels Committee. Zig, you're on the line with Senator Lee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Lee, for holding these town hall meetings. We very much appreciate that of you.
Thank you, Zig.
My question concerns the No Labels Committee. Just a brief review. It's an organization of Democrats, Republicans, Independents to encourage elected officials to give up the all-or-nothing partisan approach and to help make Congress, America, the President, and the government work. My question is, could you explain your position and reasons why for your position on the No Labels Committee and whether you believe this can work for us?
Sure, you bet. Look, I think it's a good organization. I think they've done some good work. I think one of the things that the No Labels movement has done is to emphasize the fact that while there are differences between the two parties that are stark and that in some cases are very difficult to reconcile, there are lots of other areas where there's a lot of room for bipartisan negotiation and compromise and widespread agreement. I have some very good friends who have been part of that organization, including my former employer, former Utah Governor John Huntsman, including Republican Senator Bob Corker, and including Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, who was a very good friend of mine. So yeah, I think they do great work, and I think it's helpful to have a platform for identifying areas of common ground. I will tell you that I work all the time. A lot of my work these days is on bipartisan legislation. A lot of the work that I'm proudest of in the Senate has been with Democrats. I'm running right now a major piece of legislation called the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act that I initiated several years ago with my friend Dick Durbin. Now, Dick Durbin is a liberal Democrat from Illinois. I am not a liberal Democrat from Illinois. I'm a conservative Republican from Utah. Yet Dick Durbin and I both agree that we have a problem with our federal minimum mandatory sentencing laws. Some of those laws create disproportionately excessive sentences, and we're trying to fix that problem. I ran a landmark piece of legislation with my friend Pat Leahy. Pat Leahy is a liberal Democrat from Vermont, and he and I ran a bill together called the USA Freedom Act. I was the sponsor, he was the co-sponsor, and the USA Freedom Act was designed to repeal and replace certain aspects of Section 215 of the Patriot Act, pursuant to which the NSA was collecting data on your phone usage and everyone's phone usage. Initially, as with the sentencing bill, there were many Republicans who were opposed to the USA Freedom Act. But in time, I was able to convince a majority, a narrow majority, but a majority nonetheless, of my Republican colleagues to join with basically all the Democratic senators, and we got that thing passed. We got it signed into law by the president. With the Sentencing Reform and Correction Act, here too we have the support of nearly every Democratic senator, a handful of Republican senators, but we're adding more every day. I'm working on another piece of legislation with Senator Leahy called the Electronic Communications Privacy Act amendments. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986 was enacted at a time when no one knew what email was, or very few people outside of government and the military did. But it says in a nutshell, and this law is still in effect, that the government may open and read your email without a search warrant for any reason or no reason at all, as long as your email is at least 180 days old. Now, no one had in mind cloud computing. No one had in mind the widespread usage of email that we have today at the time the Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986 was passed. But Pat Leahy and I discovered that this was a problem. We developed legislation on it several years ago. I'm pleased to report that just week before last, the House of Representatives passed that legislation unanimously. I spoke to Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley just a couple of days ago, and he told me that he's scheduling that bill for a markup in the Senate Judiciary Committee week after next. So I look forward to proceeding with that. I've got another piece of legislation I'm working on with Senator Dianne Feinstein, another liberal Democrat from California. It's called the Due Process Guarantee Act, and it says that the federal government may not indefinitely detain any U.S. person, meaning an American citizen or lawful permanent resident, lawfully on American soil, without charge or without trial, merely based on the type of allegations raised against them. While this may sound like unremarkable legislation, or while this may sound like something that's compelled already by the Constitution, because it is, sadly, it is necessary because there was legislation passed by Congress a few years ago in the Defense Authorization Act, enacted in 2011 for fiscal year 2012, that purports to give the federal government the power to lock you up without trial, without counsel, without a jury, simply based on the type of allegations raised against you. If they accuse you of being a certain type of terrorist, then you're no longer entitled to your Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, amendment rights under the Constitution. Senator Feinstein and I are trying to correct that. So look, I could go on to list other examples, but these are some prominent examples of legislation I've worked on with Democrats, and an example of why efforts like the No Labels movement are helpful to keep us focused on things that Democrats and Republicans can and often do regularly agree on.